Well, hello. Thanks for letting me hijack a little bit of your class today. I'm excited to be here. So most of you are juniors, seniors. How many of you are junior, seniors? Okay, so pretty much everybody. Yeah, we don't have very many that are younger than that. Great. Well, I'm excited to get to know some of you. I'll introduce myself really quickly. The reason I'm here is I'm interviewing for a faculty position in the marriage and family therapy program. I actually grew up in Utah. I grew up in Layton, not too far from here, and did a bunch of my schooling here, and then I did my PhD at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. Anybody know where that is? Okay, so we got some Texas people. Yeah, so if you don't know Lubbock, you probably, just imagine this, but really flat, and no mountains. So that's a little bit of what it's like. So thanks for letting me come. I want to talk a little bit about technology in relationships, and hopefully we can have some lively discussions about technology. So. I'm calling this technology and marital relationships a love story. So we're going to kind of start at the very beginning, and then things are going to get a little more serious with technology, and we'll kind of move that way. Okay, so that's my subtitle. But before we begin, I want to see just broadly, speaking about technology and relationships. How many of us have been on a dating app or dating website at some point in our lives? Okay, so not everyone. We got a couple. Okay, how many know somebody that has some couple that's maybe they're still together, maybe they're not, but no couples that have met online. And okay, so most of us, so we're pretty familiar with the fact that technology, even from the very beginning of relationships, plays a part in one bringing people together, but maybe even sometimes pushing people apart in some ways, right? So I want to talk a little bit. So dating. In online dating, using online dating apps is now the most common way for relationships to start. This data is even a little bit old. Does this have a little button? Oh yeah, that's kind of fun. So in 2005, there was 41% of couples were meeting on an online dating site. This was in the readings that were assigned for today, and then. It's February 2014, so this is even still about 5 years ago. 63% were meeting that way. I've seen some newer studies. It's not the same group, but some newer estimates of somewhere around 75 to 80% of relationships start through an online dating app in some way. I don't know, what are your reactions to that? It doesn't seem to fit what's going on in this room. Maybe Provo, Utah is the lone exception, but what does that fit with your experience in terms of people you know and how people interact? Yeah.
I'd say definitely yeah. I know several people who got married or are getting married because they met on mutuals or Tinder or whatever, but then also just from like pop culture, I've heard from some of the podcasts I listen to from like young adults where they're trying to date in LA or these other big cities where dating is hard, and most people do end up meeting on an app.
Yeah.
Because people don't meet in person anymore, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I just had a question. When it says online dating site, do they ever differentiate between the apps versus like an online site? Or is it all kind of lumped together?
Yeah, in this study, I think it was all, this was specific online dating sites. I think it includes apps. There are some other studies that kind of differentiate between the two. One of the ones I saw said about 40% are through dating apps. Maybe another 20-something% are through online dating websites. And I can't remember what the other random percentage was, but I think those are some of the main avenues that people find relationships through. So I think dating apps are probably the biggest. Yeah.
I'm just going back to why ours may be different. I think with the LDS culture, we have single wards, and that's
Sure.
like the one last way we can meet people in person.
Yeah,
Whereas
that's
other
true. The
places-
last frontier, right here, at Singles Words, where relationships start, right? Face-to-face relationships happen. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, maybe if you're constantly interacting and wards are often changing, right? Maybe you're moving, or every semester there's a fresh batch of people that you get to know, and there's maybe potential, right? Okay, good. Any other thoughts about
I feel like it might not reflect as much here because we might be kind of ashamed of using them.
Sure.
I have friends that met on mutual, but they say, oh, we met with a mutual friend because they don't want to admit.
a mutual friend? Oh, how convenient that my friend
I
is
have a lot of
through
people
my
that I
phone.
know that do that. So just
A mutual friend. That's clever. That's a good name for the for an app. If anybody's interested in that. So yeah, it sounds like technology already is meant to bring people together, right? And we'll talk about it a little bit more as it's integrated into relationships. But for those who maybe have been on dating apps, maybe nobody wants to confess this. Maybe there is a little bit of a stigma. I just assumed that everybody was on one at some point. But for those who are on dating apps or dating websites, oftentimes dating websites might operate a little differently than some of the dating apps. Anybody know how they operate differently? Any experience with that? We don't have to talk about personal experience. It could be other people's experience. Yeah.
Isn't it that on websites it's more like you get matched up with people who are more similar to you, whereas on apps like Tinder it's just here is the entire population of people that in this category that you've specified.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a lot of the online apps you're spending some time filling out your own assessments, and it's trying to match people up with you that are similar in some ways, right? That seem to be your perfect match. Yeah.
The online dating sites have like an older generation, the apps are younger, or
Yeah, that's also one of the differences that tend to happen is that older people tend to be on the online dating apps. I don't know that that's always true anymore, but at least 10 years ago when this was pretty new, that seemed to be the trend. But certainly, yeah, I think there's also some of this assumption that phone dating apps tend to be for maybe for flings or for hookups or something like that, whereas the online tend to be about finding a mate. But maybe not true across the board. I'm sure there are online purposes. You can find online resources for anything that you would like to do, but I think that seems to be the general trend that we see, right? So let's talk about a little bit more about time to get serious, okay, with our technology use. So technology, we know, can bring people together a little bit, but once you're integrated into a relationship, maybe once the initial contact has been made, whether you met them in your singles ward or not, right, or through some other avenue, some face-to-face avenue, how does technology get integrated into your relationships? What role does it play in the relationships that people have?
So many. Well, just like one example that I thought of from the reading, it said 25% of people text their partner while they're both at home. And I was like surprised. I thought that was kind of low because I literally just did that last night. And I feel like people do that all the time. I texted my husband like, I'm done with my homework. What do you want to do now? And he was in the next room.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like it definitely plays a huge role, even just like in an article I was reading for my paper that it can be a positive thing because couples are using texting to send like positive messages throughout the day, like, hey, thinking of you, something just nice.
Mm-hmm.
So it can have definitely positive impacts and maybe negative because I could have walked up and talked to him in person, but I didn't.
Yeah, isn't that funny? We like kind of read these things about technology. I had that same experience. I don't know if anybody else has this sort of experience where I read that and I was like, thank goodness I'm not in one of those relationships where we have to text when we're in the same room or opposite, different rooms in the same house. And then the very next morning, my wife sent me a text from the other room saying, hey, can you bring me this from the kitchen or something like. Anyway, I just thought, maybe I am in that relationship. Okay, yeah. What other role do we see it playing? Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I also think that it can be a positive bonding thing. Like
Sure.
me and my husband, when we were dating, we used the app Marco Polo a lot, just send like the quick videos, like when we were vacationing or things like that. And
Sure.
even today, before I did the readings, I just like got Marco Polo. I was like, are those still there? And I went through and looked at like all these videos of us when we were dating and like leading up to our engagement. I was like, this is awesome. Like I have all these like time
Like a
capsule-
video diary.
Yeah, like these memories.
Sure.
And that like. Not that I'm not affectionate already, but that kind of like made me a little more affectionate because I was like, like reminiscing, that's great, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, what other role does it play? So it has a way to keep us connected, right, when we're apart.
One of the, in the readings that I thought was most interesting was when they talked about like resolving an argument through texting. And I don't know if that's good or bad because sometimes you don't get as heated when you have to write it down and maybe you're more calm and collected, but at the same time, like you probably shouldn't.
You read my mind. That was my first question. How do we distinguish when things need to be communicated in person, over the phone, or by a text message? Yeah.
In one of my classes, we talked about, or he had like a scale, like if it's in this green zone where it isn't going to create any conflict, it's totally fine to communicate over text. If it's in the yellow zone where it's slightly tension, like maybe you can communicate that something needs to be communicated and set up a time, but if it's in the red zone where it's a high stress situation or you're frustrated or anything like that, it should not be done over text because you don't get the body language, you don't get the voice tone, you don't get these other things that portray messages, and so it's really easy to misinterpret what's said.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody had that experience of misinterpreting a text before? We've all been there. Well, I have. I've been there before. Okay, but I liked your point over here too. So tell me a little bit more about why you think it could be a positive thing, maybe even in the red zone that we're talking about.
I don't know. I just feel like sometimes it's like if you have to actually write it down, when you're like in the heat of the moment, you could say something and like not think about it. When you actually have to like type it out, you're thinking about it more.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
For my paper, I was just on the Gottman Institute website, and one of them said that, like, if you're in a heated argument, maybe take a break and write a note to your partner and give it to them instead of yelling at them, because then it makes you think it through more, and like you can make revisions or something.
Yeah.
So maybe that could apply to texting.
Yeah. Anybody ever wrote like an angry text message and then realized, maybe not. Maybe I'll say this differently, right? You get some time to be able to process it and fine tune your message. But does that always result in successful outcomes or clear outcomes? Maybe not.
I think it's hard too though because like I'm all about like writing notes that are like nice and things like that. But I think even when we think we're being rational, like words can be immortalized. Like it's like you have that hard copy and it's easier to forget, I think, sometimes a rude tone than it is to read a letter and be like, wow, like they were upset here. And so I think you have to be cautious with it too.
Sure. Yeah, and the big risk is, can we misinterpret the tone sometime, right? And wondering if the way we're reading it is the way that it's intended, right? Playing the guessing game, that can be the big challenge. So, any other challenges? Yeah.
I would say if you're having like a big issue that can't be resolved right away, you have to go to work or school or something, it can be hard to be like wait 8 hours and feel so frustrated at your spouse all day or like your person. So it just like can be hard not to communicate at all, and so sometimes it can be helpful to just send something small or just like, I'm frustrated but I want to talk about it later, and it doesn't have, you don't have to solve the problem over text, but I think it can be helpful to just act, like still talk to them. So it kind of seems harsh just to not talk for so long and like be in anger when you can just send something, a little text. It doesn't solve it, but it kind of helps.
Sure. Yeah. Any other ways that it feels like maybe the technology gets in the way? So we've talked about maybe there's some pros there, right? But any other thoughts about? Yeah.
I feel like sometimes when there's like a lot going on, like we're both getting a lot of texts about different things, we're just not present. And like I'll notice my husband's talking to me and I like look at him and he's like, where are you? And I'm like, I don't know. I disappeared into my phone. And it's not like either of us are doing like malicious things or like on social
Where you're like
media.
orienting yourself, right?
Yeah, but it's just like all the like different things we use our phones for emails and texts and everything are very distracting.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, go ahead.
My husband was a freelancer for quite a while, and so his work didn't stop at 5. And he had a lot of emails that he would look at and stuff, and he would just go into it, and then I'd turn around and say something, he'd be like, I'm trying to work, and we had to like lay boundaries, like you cannot text or do emails on your phone for work unless you're in your office with the door shut. That way I can clearly know, like if you're on your phone out here, I'm gonna assume you're on like Instagram or Facebook browsing. But if you're in your office, I know you're working, and I won't, bug you with that. But for a while, it was really, it did cause a lot of conflict because he would get into his work and I would interrupt his work not knowing he was working because I can't see what he sees on his phone.
Sure. Yeah, and in a lot of ways, this is where it can be challenging to know in what. Oftentimes we just assume a lot about what is acceptable or what is unacceptable. Let me go ahead and close the store. What is acceptable and what is unacceptable technology use, right? We kind of assume that, and when we don't talk about it, that's where some of the conflict comes up, right? And I kind of like this quote: when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck, right? So oftentimes the technology that we really think about as bringing us closer together, it can also oftentimes end up looking like this, right? The buttons. Oh, the button's still working. I just hitting the wrong button. Yeah, oftentimes it can leave us separated from one another, right? So some things to consider as you consider your own relationships or potentially talking to other people who experience the influence of technology in their relationships, which is probably most people. One, what are the expectations about tech use by your partner and you? So your example right there of if you're in the office, I know that's how we can communicate. That's where we can have some sort of clarity about is it okay to disturb? Is it okay to connect with you, in a face-to-face way right now? What that looks like. What are some of the things you guys might expect about this in terms of expectations, or have you experienced people having very different expectations about technology use?
So like me and my husband, I expect people to text me back, like not like a lot, but just like once throughout the day. And my husband, no, like nothing. And I'm like, are you alive? And we both just have these different expectations. And he's like, no, like everything's totally fine. And I'm like, I don't even know like what you've been doing for 10 hours. And so I think like we just all have these kind of different views on how we should be using it and communicating with it.
Yeah, it takes some negotiation, right? There's a comment.
Yeah, I think it just definitely takes talking about, like, if me and my husband are out at dinner somewhere, we have already communicated that we will have our phones away. But then we see like other couples in a restaurant and they're both on their phones, so either they don't care or they haven't communicated about that before. So you just have to talk about everything that might bother you if it comes up and like resolve it as it goes.
Yeah, and the challenge is, how do we find an appropriate balance? There might be some couples who agree that anytime we're together, we're not going to be on our phones, or we're not going to be on computers. Other couples negotiate what that looks like, right? Some people might need to be on their phones. Maybe they're on call, or maybe they have the type of job that you never really are free from, right? And so it takes a lot of negotiation. So when it comes to other technology or social media use, another thing to consider is what is appropriate to share, right? is sharing about our recent our most recent fight online. Is that appropriate or inappropriate, right? Or sharing about frustrations you're having in a specific Facebook group, something like that. Where does that come up? Any examples of that? Where you see differences in expectations in terms of maybe social media posting? Mm-hmm.
I am a gushy cheese ball, and so I like to post about dates we go on, or our anniversary, or the anniversary of our first date, or whatever. And my husband doesn't post anything about our relationship ever. And like, I know him; it has nothing to do with our relationship. But he's just an extremely private person, so he just doesn't post about our relationship at all.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine at some point there's a conversation of like, what? But can't you like tell everybody how much you love me a little bit? You know? Yeah, there are very different approaches and motivations for using technology, right? What about exchanging passwords? When do you know is the appropriate time to exchange a password?
You talk about like telling your partner the password to your technological device.
Yeah, either your accounts or
If you're stressed about sharing your password, it probably should have already been shared.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Okay.
Probably should never have gone to that point where it's like it's just about sharing.
Sure, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right? If you're maybe in a very committed relationship, we're probably hoping there's some level of openness there.
Yeah, I was you said like when do you share it, and I just think every time it comes up, like my husband wants to log into something or do something, it's like, hey, what's his password? Oh, here you go. Text it to him if he wants to do it. If we're not even together and he needs a password, it's like, here's my email, here's my Amazon. Like, it's not, you don't ever hide something from a spouse that you're supposed to be 100% committed to.
Sure.
So it's not like you have to sit down and be like, here's my list of my friends' 50 passwords. Like, make sure you have these. It's just like, if he needs it.
These are the ones where I put 1 at the end.
Yeah,
And this is the one where I put an exclamation point.
It's like, oh, hey, can I order something off your Amazon? Yeah, here you go.
Okay.
Just like that.
Great. Yeah, when you need it. Well, yeah, go ahead.
This reminded me of, I don't know if anyone's seen Married at First Sight. It's a crazy show to begin with. It's this reality show where like these experts match people up and they get married right when they see each other. But one of the therapy exercises after is they open up their phones to the other person. And like they freak out. To be fair, they're strangers to each other. But I feel like it's more about the attitude. Like if you feel like you're okay, it's like you being okay with exchanging your phones, your passwords, all your social media. It's more about that than actually like making sure they have all the passwords.
Sure. Yeah, so there's what I'm hearing is this level of trust, right? If we have this environment of trust in the relationship, it shouldn't be a big deal to share passwords or. But I guess I also wonder on the other side, are there situations where it's inappropriate to share specific passwords, or may not be the best?
I don't know if it's like, I can't think of a reason that it would be inappropriate to give the password, but I think it would be inappropriate if you're like, I'm gonna check your Instagram weekly to see if you're messaging other people or something.
Okay.
Like that would just be annoying and probably cause a lot of problems.
Sure. Yeah, and I think sometimes that's oftentimes a dynamic that we see with technology. So, like I mentioned, I'm a marriage and family therapist, so a lot of what I do is clinical work too. But I see a lot of couples coming in where maybe there's been infidelity or one partner feels betrayed by the other partner using porn, right, or looking at porn. And that's oftentimes one of the dynamics that can sometimes develop is the other partner, gets shocked, they might get surprised, and they might feel like they really need to investigate, right? And sometimes they can sort of develop this permanent position of policing their partner's behavior, right? I need to be the one to you know, you're not gonna slip one on me again, that sort of thing, right? And I think the foundation of that is a lot of trust. If there's been a betrayal of trust, that can be tough to build back up. Yeah. Any other thoughts about passwords or other things? So some of the other things to consider, I guess. I'm chatting a little bit more than I thought I would, so maybe we'll pop through these a little quicker. But do you tell your partner whom you're texting? Are there certain people that you should be telling, right? Is it okay to be anonymous online? Any places in the home that are off limit to electronic devices? What are the rules for use in the car? Does this ever come up where, you know, like, I do not like that you are, you know, you're texting and driving. I do this with my brother in relationships. He's very open to using his phone, and I get really nervous, you know. I'm like, pay attention. Like, I'll find the song on the phone, right?
Yeah, my husband does that a lot of times. Like, he'll be trying to find something, and I'm like, do it when I'm not in the car. Like, you can kill yourself, like, but you're not.
Sure.
I tell him that all the time. It drives me insane. Because
Sure.
I'm like, if you want to put your own life at risk, cool, do it. I don't care, but not while I'm in the car.
Great. Yeah. So these are some things to consider. You know, are these things negotiated? Right? Is it okay to ask your partner to not do that, even when you're not in the car? Right? Is that a request you can make? Is it okay to post photos of your children? What kind of contact does each partner regard as cheating? This is a big one too, right? And this is one that comes up, I think, pretty frequently. How would you define that? What kind of contact counts as cheating?
I would say if it's something that you're not comfortable, like if you're having a conversation with a member of the opposite sex and you're not comfortable sharing with your spouse what you've talked about, I think that's when it's considered cheating. Like if you're having an intimate conversation with someone else, like that's like even before it gets to anything like physical or romantic, like that's too far.
Okay. No, okay. Any other thoughts?
I think it's just good to communicate. In another class I had, we read a research article on infidelity that pointed out that men view infidelity differently than women. Do men see actions towards infidelity, like physical intimacy would be more infidelity, and then women would feel like emotional intimacy would be infidelity.
And in terms of the emotional, the relationship impact that can have on the relationship can be very different on the type of infidelity, right? So gender might make a difference. Let's get some of these other comments.
I was just going to say, Dr. Carroll showed us a study that hasn't been published yet, I think. I don't think it has. But it like showed how people view different things as cheating in a marriage, like as far as technology goes, and like it was interesting because like the rate for like porn as cheating was like very low. Like people didn't believe that was cheating, but like being friends with an ex on Facebook, they like thought was worse than porn, and like it just kind of like they were like, if it's like somebody that we know, it's cheating, but if it's like a stranger and it's impersonal, like doesn't really matter. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's some interesting research even around porn use that the shame associated with porn use tends to be the secrecy behind it. When one partner feels like they really have to hide the porn use, that's what tends to damage the relationship satisfaction, rather than, if both partners are open to that and have negotiated that, then there might be different expectations, right? So having a shared understanding of what that looks like. What's your comment?
I was just thinking, so like one of my very best friend from high school I'm still in contact with is a guy, and so it's been interesting, like since I've gotten married, just the decision I've made where I'm like, okay, like I still like have close contact with this friend, but my husband needs to be 100% aware of like what we're talking about or anything like that, just because I'm like, not that anything would happen there, but I never want to jeopardize him feeling like he's like a back burner option or anything like that. And so I think it is like where you're emphasizing your time, especially like in your communications, and making sure that like your spouse is still number one, regardless of anything, and that your relationship is like top priority.
Sure. Yeah, I think those are some good general guidelines. Maybe feeling, taking some time to be introspective about, would my partner really be comfortable if I were sharing this? But also being proactive and having conversations of, I really value this friendship. I want to continue this friendship, but I want to continue it in a way that never jeopardizes what we have, right? Some good approaches, right? So thinking about how some other ways that technology influences relationships. I thought this was a fascinating study. It was 2014, so not too long ago. And what they did is they had 100 couples just come in for a casual meeting. They were either asked to talk about a casual topic for 10 minutes, or they were asked to talk about some sort of meaningful topic in their relationship, right? And the researchers just observed. It's not like the researchers were in the room. They just observed from another room, and they wanted to see whether or not people used their phone in the interaction. Not that they were looking at their phone, but even if they had their phone out on the table, if they had the phone in their hand but they weren't using it, to see if that influenced interactions in some way. So some of what they found was pretty interesting. So those who had phones had superior conversations. We'll talk about what that meant. Had superior conversations compared to those who didn't have phones had superior conversations with their partner than those who had the phone. So they weren't using the phones. They weren't on their phones looking at it, but they just had them in their hands, or they were just present. Interesting to think about, right? And this was true for males, females. Didn't matter what age you were. This was true for different ethnicities, depending on the mood you were in. It was across all of those groups. So those who talked without cell phones reported higher levels of empathic concern, right? So the observers who watched them talk, they rated their conversations on all of these different areas, and so not having a phone there just increased the level of empathy within the conversations. Another thing that they found was those who had phones were less willing to disclose deep feelings and were less understanding of one another. Isn't that crazy? What are your reactions to that? Does that fit for your own experience in having a phone present in your conversations? Yeah.
It's hard to say because I feel like I always have my phone with me or out or whatever, so I don't know that I've ever compared it.
Sure. I mean, everybody probably usually has their phone with them, right? Yeah. So interesting to think about. Is it having an effect on how we are really communicating? Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Maybe a month ago, my husband and I started on Sundays to not have our phones or any TV or anything until 5 p.m. Whatever. And I felt like it made a huge difference on the Sabbath. We had to be really creative on what to do. I didn't realize how much we relied on watching a church movie or a Disney movie or anything, or being on our phones or playing things there, and I didn't realize how much we relied on that. And so I love that, raw communication of just us. We go on walks, we just sit and talk, and it makes a huge difference for us.
Sure. Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, I'm going to come back to your comment in just one second. I think in a lot of ways, we oftentimes might not realize the spontaneity that can occur within relationships until we really don't have our phones with us, or we don't have technology in the way. Oftentimes when the technology is away, that's where that's where couples have some of their more spontaneous interactions. That's where maybe they're connecting with each other in different ways, or weird things happen, right? Rather than being kind of in our own little worlds and focusing on maybe other people and other people's lives, but not focused on each other, right? Let's hear your comment.
Well, it's kind of just to piggyback off of that, but like I manage a store, and so much of my work when I'm at home is done on my phone. And so I feel like when I am able to step away from work and my phone, it's like a breath of fresh air where I feel like I almost probably share like too many feelings with my husband, because it's like so much work all day, but then it's finally like a relief when you're able to get away from your phone.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's good that you can structure that time to be, if technology is something you use for work, and then you really value the time to be away from that, right? That seems to be pretty positive, right? Oftentimes people really want to be able to just relax and kind of escape into their phone right after a long, stressful day. Yeah.
I was gonna say that, so like having your phone with you, even if, or like touching it, like you always have those like phantom vibrations or
Sure.
something like that. It's like an attention divider. Even though there's nothing at all going on my phone, the fact that it's in my hand, there's part of me that wants to think somebody's gonna text me any moment, or this or that. And so I can understand how it's hard to understand somebody else because your attention's divided. You're not actually giving your full attention, even though nothing's going on with your phone. You're still like thinking about it, like subconsciously.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard.
Yeah, I've had the experience, and maybe some of you have too. Maybe you've had like a social media fast or been off of your phone for a while. I remember having a period where I left my phone at home for like a month, and here I was thinking that I was really, I wasn't very dependent on technology, that I really enjoyed the face-to-face interaction, but I noticed a big difference. I noticed even just in a group of friends, how sometimes there's a kind of a group flow that flow to the conversation, and when you get normally to that lull in the conversation, that's sometimes when people pop out their phones and we start looking otherwise, right? It's changed the way that we interact. It's changed the way that we communicate in a lot of ways, and so I might recommend spending some time and comparing the differences, taking some time to consider how that influences your own interactions, your own relationships, or other people's relationships. So I'm already over my time, but I really appreciate everybody's comments. I even had a lot more prepared because I had no idea how much people would be willing to share. So I really appreciate that, and I enjoyed the opportunity to get to know you all a little bit more and talk about this. So thank you again, and I'll let you all continue with your class. Thanks.